power line and transmission line across the state of Wyoming and beyond. In the short version, a few breaks came my way. One job always led to another in a life that's taken me to far more places than I ever expected. It took me into this Capitol for the first time in 1968 with the hopes of working for a guy named Don Rumsfeld as his congressional fellow. During that first interview, he made it clear to me that I was not what he was looking for and threw me out. A few months later, he saw the error of his ways and recruited me to be his assistant during that first term of the Nixon administration. When Jerry Ford became president, he accepted me on Don's recommendation and later made me White House Chief of Staff. Don Rumsfeld and Jerry Ford fundamentally changed my life. A decade later, I returned to the Capitol as Wyoming's sole member in the House of Representatives. I fully intended to spend my career in the Congress, but will always be grateful to President George H.W. Bush for asking me to join his administration as Secretary of Defense. I don't recall exactly when I was first introduced to President Bush's eldest son, but I must have made a half-decent impression. When the time came, Governor Bush needed a running mate, and I got the notion that I could help him find one. That search committee was a diligent little enterprise, and before long we found our man.
Former Vice President Dick Cheney, back in 2015, reflecting on nearly 40 years of political life in the nation's capital at a ceremony in the Capitol Rotunda. Today, family and friends bidding the former Defense Secretary, Member of Congress, and Vice President farewell with a funeral at the National Cathedral here in Washington. And we'll be bringing you live coverage of the service here on the C-SPAN networks. Among the notable speakers at today's funeral, daughters Mary Cheney and former Representative Liz Cheney of Wyoming, Pete Williams, the former NBC reporter and spokesman for Cheney during his time as Defense Secretary. We'll also hear from the 43rd President, George W. Bush, who he served for 8 years. Also in attendance today, former President Joe Biden and every living Vice President, Kamala Harris, Mike Pence, Al Gore, and Dan Quayle. And from Capitol Hill, House Speaker Emeritus Nancy Pelosi, Senate Majority Leader John Thune, and his predecessor, Senator Mitch McConnell. Who will not be there today? The current president, President Trump, and Vice President J.D. Vance. Welcome to C-SPAN's coverage of the funeral here in Washington of the late Vice President Dick Cheney. Joining us for a conversation ahead of the funeral is Joel Goldstein, who's the author of The White House Vice Presidency, The Path to Significance, Mondale to Biden. He's also a law professor at St. Louis University. Joel Goldstein, we are honoring the life here, Washington is, of the former vice president. What is the role of the vice president in our government?
Well, the role of the vice president has really evolved. The Constitution gives it only two functions, to preside over the Senate and to be first in line of presidential succession. Nowadays, vice presidents almost never preside over the Senate. And although the successor function is important, succession rarely happens, only 9 times in our history. So what has evolved is that the vice president, particularly beginning with the Jimmy Carter administration and Walter Mondale's vice presidency, serves as a chief advisor to the president and takes on assignments from the president that need to be handled at a high level.
And the last vice president, the Biden administration, the previous vice president, I should say, Kamala Harris, sitting in the front row today here at this funeral proceedings for the late Vice President Dick Cheney. And behind her, a couple rows, you can see current Senators Lindsey Graham and Lisa Murkowski also in attendance. These funerals tend to be a who's who of Washington. When and how did the powers of the vice presidency change before Dick Cheney took over as vice president? How did they evolve?
Well, the change happened gradually during the 20th century, but really with the vice presidency of Richard Nixon in the Eisenhower administration, from 1953 to 61, the vice president really, for the first time, became on an ongoing basis part of the executive branch. Whereas previous vice presidents had spent most of their time presiding over the Senate, Nixon spent little time presiding over the Senate and really took on executive functions. But vice presidents for the quarter century beginning with Nixon were frustrated. Much of what they did was peripheral. And it was really with the Carter administration when Walter Mondale moved into the West Wing of the White House, got access, became a chief ongoing presidential advisor and operator who was really part of the president's inner circle. Carter and Mondale created a new model of the vice presidency, what I've called the White House vice presidency. And administrations from both parties since then have largely followed that.
The National Cathedral is situated just miles north of.
Dick Cheney was almost as strong a leader as Bush. He was almost just as strong, just a very powerful vice president, one of the most powerful vice presidents we've ever had.
Of the White House here in Washington, D.C., and inside.
Just think of, you'll see the difference when you think of Dick Cheney and then think of J.D. Vance. Two totally different human beings. And one very much ill-equipped to handle the office of a vice president or anything else. One totally out of his depth compared to Dick Cheney. Cheney was a powerful. That's what you consider a powerful vice president. This one, the one we have now, is very weak.
The cathedral, we are watching as the former Vice President Kamala Harris, presidential candidate, of course, in 2024. She was talking just earlier, you saw, with the former Vice President Al Gore. It looks like Mike Pence and his wife, the former Second Lady Karen Pence. They are making their way into this row. They'll be seated, it looks like, right next to Kamala Harris. And as we said, all the living vice presidents today in attendance for the funeral of the late Vice President Dick Cheney. As we continue to watch here, I want to take us back to about 4 years after leaving office. Former Vice President Dick Cheney talked about his early life in Wyoming and how he ended up getting from his childhood home to the nation's capital.
I was recruited to go to Yale when I got out of high school, and then I got kicked out twice. I ended up back in Wyoming building power line and transmission line for some years, and then ultimately decided I needed to get an education. So I went back to school at the University of Wyoming. I got my BA and my master's at the University of Wyoming back in the 60s, and then went on to Wisconsin, where I was working on a doctorate and completed all the coursework, won what's called a congressional fellowship. It's in effect an internship that had a stipend with it. And it was a relatively small group, but we were able to pick the member of Congress we wanted to work for. And I can't.
Cheney was a mess, boy. Cheney was, whoo. Everybody hated his ass for real. Yeah, yes. Yeah.
Came to Washington to stay.
Yeah, but we gotta, he was back then, this is when president and vice presidents, they put just a different era. It's a totally different era now.
12 months in 1968, and I stayed about 40 years. I was very impressed with one young congressman from the North Shore of Chicago, a guy named Don Rumsfeld. And he spoke to the group, and I thought, well, I'd kind of like to go to work for him. So I went and interviewed him with him, and he had me in his office, and he asked me what I was doing. I'm explaining how I was studying the way Congress voted and doing a PhD thesis and so forth. And then I was going to go back and become a professor. And he listened for about 10 minutes, and he stood up and he said, "This isn't going to work," and threw me out. He claims that's not what happened, but I took notes. I remember it very well. A couple of months later, he was named by President Nixon, who was just starting his administration to run the Anti-Poverty Agency, the old Office of Economic Opportunity. And I sat down shortly after he was announced, and I wrote an unsolicited 12-page memo to him, telling him how he ought to conduct himself in his confirmation hearings, what he ought to do with the agency once he took over, what kinds of policy initiatives he should undertake, and so forth.
Dick Cheney was born in 1941 in Lincoln, Nebraska. He dropped out of Yale University, then he finished his degree in political science at the University of Wyoming. He worked at the White House under the Nixon administration and was later appointed to President Gerald Ford's chief of staff. After President Ford lost re-election in 1976, Cheney ran for Congress in Wyoming, where he served 6 terms. The former President Joe Biden shaking hands there with the former Republican leader Mitch McConnell and his wife, the current majority leader John Thune, in attendance, shaking hands with the former Vice President Al Gore as well. The former First Lady Jill Biden also in attendance today, honoring the life and legacy of Dick Cheney. In 1989, Dick Cheney was chosen to serve as President George H.W. Bush's defense secretary, and in 2001, President George W. Bush's vice president. And there is the man that he served for 8 years, the former president, George W. Bush. We will hear from him today at this funeral service. He'll be delivering a eulogy along with the daughters of the former vice president. You can see the former First Lady Laura Bush also there in the front row. The dignitaries taking their seats ahead of these funeral proceedings, which will get underway around 11 a.m. Eastern time. And we will have live coverage here on the C-SPAN networks. We're talking with Joel Goldstein. He is the author of The White House Vice Presidency, The Path to Significance, Mondale to Biden. He's also a professor at St. Louis University. Professor Goldstein, Dick Cheney had a long political career, as we just learned, before he was George W. Bush's vice presidential pick. How did that shape his idea of the vice presidency?
Well, he had seen the vice presidency from many perspectives.
I mean, people hated Dick Cheney. I mean, I understand because of the Iraq War. They misled us into getting into the Iraq War. I get all of that. Weapons of mass destruction, Saddam Hussein, X, Y, and Z, right? 4,000 soldiers killed, hundreds of Iraqis. Middle East got destabilized. ISIS formed. You name it, it happened under Cheney's manipulation. It definitely happened under Cheney's manipulation. But the one thing you could not say was, I mean, I admire strong men, you know, who I admire strong men who, you know, may put the country first, may do X, Y, and Z first, but he was an outright asshole. He was just like almost the president compared to regular George W. Bush, because he was really something else. Did a lot of shit. He did a lot of shit.
Is the young chief of staff to President Ford. He had really battled with Ford's Vice President Nelson Rockefeller and really excluded him from and cut him down to size in a way. But he'd also seen George H.W. Bush as vice president from the perspective of the House under Reagan, and then in the Bush administration with Dan Quayle. So he had a sense of the vice presidency from different perspectives. I think that his prior service gave him the idea, particularly being in the White House during the Ford administration, where he'd seen the presidency weakened in the post-Watergate periods. It really created in him, in part, or contributed to his view that the presidency had been unduly weakened, and into his commitment to expanding executive power.
How did he want to change it then, given what he saw were the weakening of those powers? And how did he change it?
Well, he really thought that the executive had been made in many respects too accountable to Congress, that his or her prerogatives had been limited, that the president's ability to take some actions had been too restricted, and that
Yes, of course they prefer it would be a preference to disestablishment, because at least you know what kind of ghoul and goblin Dick Cheney was. He was a ghoul and a goblin from day one. Trump tries to deceive you into thinking he is your friend and ends up stabbing you in the back. Dick Cheney just comes right at you. I'm a monster, and you need to learn how to play with monsters. That's not what Trump is. Trump is a chameleon who tries to trick you into thinking X, Y, and Z. Cheney never did that. You knew he was a monster from day one.
there was too much efforts to make the executive accountable and transparent in ways that were detrimental. And so he worked really to combat that, both when he was put in charge of the Energy Task Force at the beginning of.
I hope y'all not still talking about them Epstein files. Them Epstein files, your president has no intention of letting those files be open. And Joe Biden had no control over the DOJ and what they had in store for those files. And those files were under investigation until 2023 or 2022 or something like that. And besides, don't try to gaslight us. Joe Biden didn't run on releasing the Epstein files. Joe Biden had nothing to do with Epstein files. That wasn't even his focus. They try to gaslight y'all. Don't let nobody try to gaslight y'all. Did nobody say nothing about running on no Epstein files except your president? Your president said that. He screwed his own self.
The Bush administration, and later after 9/11, in some of the measures that he advocated with respect to the war on terror.
2 presidents and 4 vice presidents all in the front row today at Washington's National Cathedral to honor the former and late Vice President Dick Cheney. You can see them all there in the front row. Dan Quayle also in attendance today, along with their wives, the former second ladies of this country. And we're going to hear from former President George W. Bush, who Dick Cheney served under for 8 years, coming up when the funeral begins here at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. I want to go back to July 2000. Then presidential candidate George W. Bush announces former Defense Secretary Dick Cheney would be his vice presidential pick. And here's Dick Cheney then and what he had to say at the Austin, Texas announcement.
Enthusiastically accept the challenge for this reason. I believe you have the vision and the courage to be a great president. When the governor first asked whether or not I would consider being a candidate, I respectfully declined. I was deeply involved in running a business, enjoying private life, and I certainly wasn't looking to return to public service. But I had an experience that changed my mind this spring. As I worked alongside Governor Bush, I heard him talk about his unique vision for our party and for our nation. I saw his sincerity. I watched him make decisions, always firm and always fair. And in the end, I learned how persuasive he can be. I look forward to working with you, Governor, to change the tone in Washington, to restore a spirit of civility and respect and cooperation. It's time for America's leaders to stop pointing the finger of blame and to begin sharing the credit for success. Big changes are coming to Washington, and I want to be a part of them. So, Governor, Laura, we're proud to join you in the work ahead for these next 3 months.
I think we're way past way past the Epstein file. We're past the Epstein files. We already know that the president is gonna obfuscate. We already know the president is gonna lie, make sure nobody can see the files. He's a petty human being. It just is what it is. He's a petty human being. So, I don't know why everybody would be surprised. Why are we even talking about the files? The man is a petty human being. Doesn't matter one way or the other.
Months and the next 8 years. Thank you very much.
Dick Cheney back in July of 2000 accepting the position of vice president, the nomination, the pick by George W. Bush to serve as his vice president. The two of them went on then to win that election and serve in that role. Back to the cathedral here in Washington, where folks have gathered to say and talk about the former vice president to honor his legacy. And I just want to point out some folks who are in attendance behind that first row. If you
Well, we don't care. Now, why did they hate Dick Cheney? For one, the Iraq War, of course. I said the Iraq War, 4,000 Americans who died, thousands of Iraqis who died, Middle East. Middle East became destabilized. ISIS formed out of that whole debacle, right? And Cheney manipulated a lot of the intelligence and pressured, a bunch of agencies to produce conclusions that the war that we went into Iraq was justified, right? It was justified. And he was pretty much the president, or he was the real president. George Bush was just a figurehead, right? And he had been in foreign policy, but he controlled a lot of the foreign policy, national security policies, the cabinet. He basically oversaw the cabinet, but he very rarely was in the public. He never was in front of a camera, very rarely. And he ran his part of the administration behind the scenes. He expanded the role of vice president. He expanded that role, and nobody has ever been able to do it like him ever since, right? That was number two. The third reason why people hated him was because he defended that waterboarding shit. He defended waterboarding, and he said he would do it again if he had the opportunity. Sleep deprivation, stress position, waterboarding. He defended all of those. And what was it called? Enhanced interrogation technique. He signed on board with those things, right? And for a lot, people was like he violated the law. He was violating the law. They thought human rights. We thought he was a war criminal, right? And he was the one who got that warrantless surveillance started. Intercepting people's internet activity, emails, collecting data. He was all in charge of doing all this stuff. I don't know whether Bush knew exactly all of the things he was doing. He was pretty much good at spying, getting people to spy on Americans, and didn't give a damn about your privacy. And he was in touch with Halliburton. He used to be the CEO of Halliburton, and so Halliburton was like a defense contracting company that received billions of government funds. Billions of government funds. There were no bid contracts. There was no competition. They just got the contracts. They were profiting off the war, profiting off the Iraq war. And Dick Cheney was the VP, or he was the what was he, CEO or something like that of Halliburton. And he had a shitty ass personality too. Shitty ass personality. Okay. And that was, he had a shitty ass person. He was very rarely in public, talking in public, but he had a no nonsense personality, right? And we haven't seen a vice president like that. All the people that get in front of the camera right now is all smiles and nice and in front of, and getting in front of the camera and smiling and being nice. Dick Cheney was never one of those people. He'd never get in front of the camera being nice. He'd just come out and be an asshole, right? He was blunt, cold, private, didn't give a damn what you said about him. I mean, he was a man's man, and he believed in, what did he believe in? He didn't, he believed in following the constitutional law as long as he didn't get caught. Let's put it that way. Long as he didn't get caught doing some illegal, like he wasn't bold and he wasn't doing it out in the open like this goofy president. We didn't find out all the things that he had done until after he had really gotten out of the presidency. We didn't really find out all of the heinous shit he did behind the scenes, right? And then that last, I think one thing about somebody got shot in the face or something like that. And yeah, a friend of his got shot in the face. So he was a person that really got that war started, the Iraq war started. He believed in that enhanced torture shit. He believed in expanding the surveillance powers, spying in the house, doing all that kind of stuff. You know, and he was a very unapologetic. Let's put it this way: he was one of the most dangerous presidents. you know how JD Vance is like a wuss. He break a nail, he crying, or if he forget to put on his makeup, he crying. The way JD Vance comes across as a girl, Dick Cheney was a man's man. He was unapologetic, got his company paid from war profits, started a war, surveillance, the regular Americans would defend torture, didn't give a damn. That's the kind of vice president he was. I mean, no nonsense, just completely different than this, completely different than the last 3 or 4 presidencies. George Bush and Dick Cheney, completely different from the last couple of presidencies. Just when those two walked in the room, you know those were two men. Those were two men, right? So JD Vance is a wuss. Just girly compared to this Dick Cheney. Girly.
Look over the former First Lady Laura Bush's head a couple rows back. You can see Congressman Jamie Raskin. We have also seen in attendance the former Congressman Adam Kinzinger, Benny Thompson, who's the chair of the Homeland Security Committee. I believe Adam Schiff is back there as well. These names might sound familiar to.
As soon as Mondami and Trump entered the Oval Office for the press conference, we will definitely be cutting to that. Okay, so this is just what we're waiting on. But you know, while we're waiting, I said we could at least attend the funeral of the most heinous, hated vice president in American history.
To all of you who tuned in to C-SPAN's coverage of the January 6th committee, because those people that we mentioned, those former and current members of Congress, served with Dick Cheney's daughter, Liz Cheney, when she served on the January 6th committee. Here's the hearse arriving here at the National Cathedral. And according to CNN, the Cheney will receive full military honors at the memorial service, which is expected to be, as we can see, a bipartisan who's who of Washington dignitaries. And those dignitaries are in.
Do y'all know why President Bush and J.D. Vance wasn't invited to the funeral? It wasn't like they actually met or clashed with Dick Cheney, right? Or was it the fact that Liz Cheney didn't consider him a legitimate president, and she told her father that same thing? And he did, and I know Dick Cheney knew that Trump was a clown. I knew Dick Cheney would think Trump and J.D. Vance were clowns.
Inside of the cathedral, they are waiting for this procession and this funeral to begin here. Live coverage on the C-SPAN networks. Joel Goldstein, we heard in that clip back from 2000, Dick Cheney talking about big changes coming to Washington. So what were some of the big changes that were made during those 8 years of the Bush-Cheney administration.
The question is, why did George W. Bush let him have free reign like that? Why did George W. Bush let him have that free reign of around the country and over foreign policy? What was the deal?
When Bush Cheney came into power, of course, it was after really the election came down to the to who won Florida, and Bush Cheney won it after the Supreme Court decision by less than 600 votes. Vice President Cheney took the position that, notwithstanding the narrowness of the presidential election and the majorities in the House and the Senate, that they should make big changes and that they weren't going to compromise. And so, among the changes that made initially were the passing of the 2001 tax cut, which was part of Governor Bush's agenda. 9/11 really introduced a new dimension and really refocused the administration on the war on terror, and then ultimately the war against Iraq, and that became preoccupations of the administration as well. There was a 2003 tax cut again that Vice President Cheney played a major part in. There was a change in energy policy that he played a big part in. The Clinton-Gore administration had entered into the Kyoto Accords, which were taking an international focus on climate change, and in large part through Vice President Cheney's influence, the Bush administration backed away from that. So those were among some of the changes. There were 2 Supreme Court appointments that were confirmed. Chief Justice John Roberts and Associate Justice Sam Alito. Those were quite different than the people that Al Gore would have appointed, or that Bill Clinton had appointed.
And how did Dick Cheney, what role did he play in those policy changes that you outlined? And as vice president, how unusual was that?
Well, Vice President Cheney was a very consequential vice president. He wasn't the president or the co-president. He wasn't the dominant person in the administration. President Bush was, but Vice President Cheney was especially in the first term, was an extraordinarily important advisor and operator who took on assignments from President Bush. He tended to focus on areas that were of most importance to him: national security, economic matters, the tax cuts, energy, environment. Those were among some of the issues. There were other issues that President Bush was interested in, like, for instance, AIDS in Africa, or stem cell research, or education, where Vice President Cheney played little or no part. But in the areas that he participated in, and particularly defense, the war on terror, Iraq, he really was one of the dominant voices who President Bush listened to, particularly in the first term. During the second term, he had less influence, but he was still very much a voice that was heard, although his views weren't always followed in the second term, especially.
We're seeing the hearse carrying the body of the late vice president outside of the cathedral here in Washington. It looks like family have gathered as well outside of the cathedral, and they will make their way inside. According to CNN, honorary pallbearers today will include members of his Secret Service detail, his former chiefs of staff, David Addington and Scooter Libby, and photographer David Hume Kennerly. They will all be honorary pallbearers, and as we noted, full military honors for the former vice president. Joel Goldstein, what do you think he would make of full military honors for him?
Well, I think in one of the earlier clips you played, I mean, where he talked about sort of the likeliness of his story,
Thank
and
you
of his
all.
background, coming from a modest.
You all hit the like button coming in, please. Hit the like button coming in. Subscribe to the channel. We have content like this all day. We are waiting for the meeting between President Trump and Mamdani. We are waiting for the meeting between Trump and Mamdani. That should be coming up as soon as possible. It was supposed to be at 3 o'clock. We don't know why there is a delay. I am waiting for the meeting between Mamdani and Trump. It's supposed to be coming up. Please hit the like button, share, and subscribe. When coming in the door, please hit the like, share, and subscribe. Please and thank you. Like and subscribe, please. Thank you.
Background, and then having some troubled times in his 20s where he was thrown out of college. I think he had a couple of DUIs as well, but then rising to the position of influence. And really, at the time he became vice president, had one of the most extraordinary resumes of any political leader of.
Yeah, it was weird. It was almost like he had more power than President Bush. President Bush was a decent human being. Let's put it that way. He seemed to be a decent human being. George W. Bush. He was a decent human boy, but that Cheney was a mess. All the stuff he didn't apologize for nothing. I mean, he didn't apologize when they confronted him about torture and waterboarding. He was like, I don't know what y'all talking about. Like, you need to go, Dick Cheney, you just belong in hell somewhere. He was like, I vacation there. Y'all better get the hell on.
Either party in American history really had seen political power from a number of different perspectives. I think that that he would have seen sort of the extraordinary nature of it and the rise that in the path that his life had taken.
You talk about his voice being a dominant one when it came to the war on terror and the Iraqi war. He has been referred to as the architect of the Iraqi war. Explain.
Well, he was one of the people. I mean, on 9/11, while President Bush was in Florida giving a speech about education at a grade school, Vice President Cheney was really the person in the command center, and then encouraged President Bush, for security reasons, to stay away from Washington for a while. Right. And it wasn't until later that evening that the president was able to return. But Vice President Cheney really was focused on the idea that that the United States could be attacked again, and that the next time, instead of 19 people with box cutters and airplanes, it could be somebody with a nuclear device. Right. And so he really focused on ways to emphasize surveillance, new means of surveillance, to put in procedures that would use military commissions for people involved in the war on terror rather than trials, and that would deny Al Qaeda participants Geneva Convention protections. And then he also was somebody who ultimately made the case that Iraq posed a danger to the United States because of what Vice President Cheney saw as the likelihood that it would produce weapons of mass destruction and share them with terrorists like Al Qaeda.
The Honor Guard has lined up behind the hearse, and we were seeing a shot earlier of his family waiting for the casket to be taken out of the hearse. They're brought into the National Cathedral. You may have caught a glimpse of the former second lady in a wheelchair there ahead of her family, Lynn Cheney, 84 years old. The two of them met in high school. They were high school sweethearts, married in 1964 and married for over 6 decades. Let's watch in as the military prepares to take his the casket from the hearse and proceed into the National Cathedral.
As I said, George W. Bush was a decent human being. He was a decent human being. You know, hey, look, I can admit when they're decent human beings. And most of the presidents and the vice presidents were. Dick Cheney was an exception because he was an extraordinary asshole, of course. And you know, barring the current people in the White House, yes. Because Dick Cheney didn't have respect for Donald Trump. He didn't have respect for Donald Trump. And he didn't have respect for, by the extension, he probably didn't have respect for J.D. Vance either. That's why he endorsed Kamala. He endorsed Miss Harris because he didn't have respect for Donald Trump or J.D. Vance because he thought they were clowns. Ain't nobody crying. We don't need to cry, psycho. We don't need to cry. Everybody understands what president you got. We understand.
Senator, thank you.
With faith in Jesus Christ, we receive the body of our brother Richard Bruce Cheney for burial. Let us pray with confidence to God, the giver of life, that he will
His middle name was Bruce?
Raise him to perfection in the company of the saints.
So he was an educated thug. An educated thug. That's what Cheney was. He got kicked out of college because he was fighting or he was doing something. He got drinking, expelled. He was doing something.
Deliver your servant Richard, O sovereign Lord Christ, from all evil and set him free from every bond, that he may rest with all your saints in the eternal habitations, where with the Father and the Holy Spirit you live and reign, one God, forever and ever.
Amen. Let us also pray for all who mourn, that they may cast their care on God and know the consolation of his love. Almighty God, look with pity upon the sorrows of your servants for whom we pray. Remember them, Lord, in mercy. Nourish them with patience. Comfort them with a sense of your goodness. Lift up your countenance upon them and give them peace. through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
The former and late Vice President Dick Cheney is being honored today at the nation's Washington Cathedral here. His family is lining up there behind the casket. The procession has begun into the church. We want to thank Joel Goldstein, who is the author of The White House Vice Presidency, The Path to Significance, Mondale to Biden, for our conversation with him today about the former vice president and the role that he played. We are watching as the dignitaries have taken their seats inside the cathedral, and the family is now waiting to go into the Washington Cathedral. We're going to hear eulogies today from his daughters.
Well, we probably won't hear those. We're going to be looking at Mondale as soon as him and Trump get on camera. We're going to see how Mondale is treated by the look of him. Did Trump drag his ass across the coals or what?
As well as the man that he served under for 8 years, former President George W. Bush. They will all be delivering remarks. There are 2 presidents in attendance today, and all 4 living vice presidents as well. Right there on your screen is Liz Cheney. You can see the back of Liz Cheney, the former vice president's wife and former second lady, Lynn Cheney, making her way up the steps. Of course, Liz Cheney, the daughter of Dick Cheney, who served in the House representing Wyoming, taking the seat that her father once had, who he served 6 terms in the U.S. House before he went on to become the youngest chief of staff in the White House. He was also defense secretary and, of course, vice president of the United States. Dick Cheney died on November 3rd at the age of 84 due to complications of pneumonia and cardiac and vascular disease. Cheney worked for 4 decades in Washington. We'll bring you now live inside the cathedral for the service marking his life and legacy.
So once they got a hold of what Trump's agenda was, Dick Cheney let it be known that he would never respect Donald Trump. So between him and Liz, I guess they came out and endorsed Kamala Harris, endorsed anybody. But of course, they were going to endorse Joe Biden. Of course. So once and who did he ran? Yeah, he Joe Biden. So every time he went against Joe Biden got was held up by Dick Cheney, and Dick Cheney never made it. Never made it. Let it be known, or he did let it be known that he didn't care for Trump at all. So it was what it was. Once you let somebody know you can't stand them, they have every right not to like you. So there's nothing wrong with that. He knew he was not liked by Dick Cheney, and he knew Cheney would not want him at his funeral. So of course he's not going to invite him to the funeral. Just like there was another funeral a while back. Wasn't it a funeral that was a while back and Trump didn't get invited to that one, or shit, I can't recall. Oh, Jimmy Carter. Was it Jimmy Carter? Yeah, I think it was Jimmy Carter. But he did get invited to that one, but he was still an asshole. Still an asshole. So it was what it was. Okay. It was primarily for vice presidents. But Joe Biden and Dick Cheney, Joe Biden and Dick Cheney had known each other a long, long time. So they were actually friends. So, of course, he's going to show up for his funeral, of course. Stop talking about Michelle Obama. Stop talking about Michelle Obama. She was one of the most educated and intellectual first ladies that we have had. Stop it. Every time I turn around, people want to denigrate that black woman. That woman has done nothing to anybody, did nothing negative to anybody. Don't call her any kind of names in this chat. She has not done anything to be disrespected. You just being disrespected just to be. Your mother is a man. Now, stop calling her a man. We're gonna go for the thought and talk.
In attendance, along with these other dignitaries. Live coverage here on the
I asked you nicely to refrain from talking about the first lady. I can't deal with childish human beings. This is the matter that I hate to deal with. This is the matter that I hate to deal with. It's full on immature. You cannot do that. Please. I love this music. Let's see. Let's bring the body in. Mm.
Good morning. On behalf of Mary Ann Buddy, the Bishop of the Diocese of Washington, and Sean Rowe, the presiding Bishop of the Episcopal Church, and all of us who serve our Lord at this cathedral, welcome. Welcome to this house of prayer for all people. It is indeed an honor for us to host this service today for Vice President.
We need to put in the motion the 25th Amendment. Maybe we need to put in the motion 25th Amendment. Maybe we need to do that. I don't know. This president has forced our hand. He's forced our hand to do a lot of things. Okay? Calling senators seditionists, calling for the arrest and the unaliving of senators. Just some wildness that's been going on all this week. The release of the Epstein files calls Mandami Mandami decided he was going to Washington to see Donald Trump. Okay? He decided he was going to see Donald Trump. He reached out to the Trump team and said, I want to come see the president. But you know, the president, he don't care about nobody but himself. He don't care about what he say and who he say it to. All right, so let's hope this meeting is more productive than a female getting called Miss Piggy on a plane, which was an embarrassment for every human being that's an American, or at least it should be.
President Cheney, thank you for being here. I know your presence means a great deal to Mrs. Cheney and Liz and Mary and the entire Cheney family. So please be seated.
I'm all for it. I think we should put the 25th Amendment on the table. The 25th Amendment should be on the table today. After all the shit that's happened this week, it should be on the table and it should be in play. Because this president has went too far. On most of the things he has went too far. Okay. I know.
President and Dr. Biden, President and Mrs. Bush, Vice Presidents Harris, Pence, Quayle, and Gore,
You all,
distinguished guests and friends,
we will tune back.
and magnificent
You all
space.
hit the like and the share button.
Before
I need you to hit the
Thanksgiving,
like and the share button.
give thanks
Hit the
to
like and the
Richard
share. We
Burns,
need the engagement. Please and thank you.
46th Vice
Hit the like
President
and the
of the
share
United
button.
States,
Hit the like
and
and
to
the
thank
share
his
button.
family, Mrs.
That's
Cheney,
what we want. We want the engagement.
Liz,
Please hit the
Mary,
like and the share
Bill,
button.
Heather, Elizabeth, Kate,
Please
Grace,
hit the like
Sam,
and
Philip,
share button.
Sarah, and Richard. Thank them for sharing him with us. I'm
But let's see.
Jonathan Reiner, and I was privileged to be the
Once we have that audio, I don't know whether they have a delay or they're gonna have a delay. But once they have that audio, we will be back up. 25th Amendment now, please make America really great. High one. The 25th Amendment now, please. The 25th Amendment now, please. I wish. Okay. You mean you're a low information voter? I'm not a low information voter. You're a low information voter. You're the low information voter. For you to come into the chat and crash out, calling everybody names except and don't know anything at all about the host or anybody in the room means you're the low information voter. Just because you like Trump doesn't mean you come into somebody's chat and crash out because you're hearing things that you don't like. Okay? That's just wild and you're a zombie. Stop the zombie talk. You want to have a conversation? Go somewhere else. Specifically, if you come in the chat crashing out. You come in, no conversation, ignorant, ill-informed, what is it? Ill-informed and no intellectual thoughts? Jesus. What kind of intellectual thoughts would we be having at a funeral, Brian Zombie Toaster? What exactly would we be doing? We've already discussed Dick Cheney. We've only discussed your idiot president ad nauseum for the longest. We're waiting for Mamdani to show up at the White House. Okay? Yeah, you need to tell Brian to calm down. The toaster came in the chat crashing out. Not talking, no hi, no bye, just crashing out, calling people names. What that tells me is you're a MAGA and you're a low information voter and you're a zombie and you just embarrassed yourself because I can do you one better. Don't ever come in my chat talking 2-point crazy and you haven't had a conversation and you haven't sat here and said anything other than what you just said. You toaster.
I'll admit I'm not very good at letting go. But it can take a village to care for a complicated patient, and I want to acknowledge the many doctors and nurses here with us today who took such magnificent care of the Vice President. Over a span of 27 years, Vice President Cheney gifted me with his trust, and there's nothing more sacred between a doctor and their patient.
MAGA rules, you fucking clown. A clown. Wait a minute. What does it say that people called MAGA follows a clown down a rabbit hole called Donald Trump? What does it say as a people who follows a clown down a rabbit hole? What does it say about a people who gave their money to a con man and the con man gave the money to other rich men? What does that say? Is he wild? Are you wild? No. I don't know whether Cheney was a clown. I don't know whether Samantha Mantra, Sam was talking about a clown. I don't care. Your president is a clown, and you sound like a clown if you're in here defending a clown. Because you came in and you crashed out too. MAGA rules, you fucking clown. No, MAGA rules you fucking clown.
Patient and trust. I'm happy to report that I haven't given many eulogies. No one wants a doctor who's great at funerals. But I stand here this morning deeply honored to tell you about my remarkable patient, Dick Cheney. 20 years before I met the Vice President, his career in elected office almost ended before it began when he suffered a heart attack during his first campaign for Congress. He was only 37. What Dick Cheney didn't know at the time, because his doctors never told him, was that they thought it would be best for him to withdraw from the race, that after the heart attack, a vigorous campaign might be too much for him. They didn't know Dick Cheney. Or more likely, maybe they did know Dick Cheney and no one had the guts to tell him to quit. So after a period of rest, he told Wyoming's voters that he was up for the challenge. He said a little hard work never hurt anybody. And later in the summer, he resumed his campaign, won that election, and then 5 more. For a man with very complex heart disease, the Vice President was the easiest patient to care for. He was meticulously compliant with his prescribed treatment. As it pertained to his health, he lived by the motto, when in doubt, check it out. He never allowed politics to influence his personal healthcare decisions, and not once in all my time as his doctor did he try to write or change a single word of a statement I issued. There was only one time in my entire tenure with the Vice President that he said no to a medical recommendation from me. It was on September 11th, 2001. I had an appointment to see him that day at the White House for a scheduled checkup. I don't typically make house calls, but sometimes I'm willing to make an exception. In advance of the visit, my colleague, Colonel Lou Hoffman, the Vice President's wonderful full-time White House doctor,
Right.
had arranged for some routine blood tests. But before the tubes could be sent to the lab, our world changed.
Wow.
Amazingly, even with the chaos and horror of that day, somehow late in the afternoon, the blood samples found their way to a lab. In the early evening, while the Vice President was on the move to an undisclosed location, Lou called to tell me that our patient's potassium level was dangerously, maybe even lethally high. I thought that the result was probably erroneous and artificial.
I mean, he knew he was a hated person. He knew he was a hated president at the time. He knew he was a hated president. Wait a minute. You all hit the like and subscribe button, please and thank you. I need the likes and the engagement, please and thank you. We are going to have a brief intermission. We will be back as soon as we hit up on Mandami. We will be back. We don't want to play the whole funeral. We just wanted to play the beginning. Please hit the like, share, and subscribe button. We will be back once Mandami hits the door and they come out for the press conference, because we got to watch that. We got to watch the press conference. I will be back. Y'all, please hit the like and the share. We definitely will. Keep an eye out, because we will definitely be back as soon as they hit the door. As soon as the press conference starts. As soon as the press conference.